Muy buenas
Muy
tardes.
buenas tardes.
Muy, 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 muy. Hola, hola.
Hola, 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 hola.
Hola. Listo. Muy buenas tardes a todas y todos. Nos complace darle la bienvenida a esta última actividad del día, que es el panel titulado IA en la educación, perspectivas globales en la educación superior. La moderación de este panel estará a cargo de la maestra Macarena de Mateo, investigadora de la Universidad Iberoamericana Ciudad de México y especialista en tecnologías educativas e innovación docente. Con entusiasmo, le cedo la palabra. Adelante, maestra Macarena.
Gracias, Sor. Pues buenas tardes a todas, a todos. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos en esta última actividad que pretende cerrar con broche de oro este primer día de actividades del TIE 2025. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to try to do this in English and Spanish because of our distinguished guests here at my left. We are so happy to have you here for this final activity of TIE 2025, where we want to discuss and open horizons about this new subject that has been part of our discourse lately about AI and the implications for the educational processes, and of course, with a critical point of view, and to discuss also about ethics and what can we do about it. Estoy muy emocionada de presentarles a nuestros tres invitados de esta tarde. Voy a permitirme leer sus semblanzas. Today we have with us Professor Wayne Holmes. He is a professor of critical studies of artificial intelligence and education at University College London, a UNESCO chair in ethics and AI and education, ethics, a UNESCO chair in the ethics and of AI and education, and an advisor on artificial intelligence and education for UNESCO and the Council of Europe. His work focuses on critical and ethical uses of AI in educational contexts, with emphasis on human rights and social justice. He has co-authored several key publications on AI, learning, and education policy, and has delivered keynote lectures around the world. So we welcome Wayne Holmes. Nuestro siguiente panelista es el doctor Abraham Mena. Es doctor en Ciencias Sociales, investigador en Ecosur e integrante del Sistema Nacional de Investigadores. Estudia las relaciones entre género, tecnología y justicia social con énfasis en la despatriarcalización de la tecnología, la educación digital crítica y las violencias en entornos digitales. También colabora activamente en medios como Chiapas Paralelo y el Observatorio de Medios Digitales del TEC de Monterrey. And last but not least, Professor Manolis, I cannot say your last name, please help me. Mavrikis. He's a professor in AI in education at the UCL Knowledge Lab. His research focuses in designing evidence-based intelligent technologies that provides feedback to students, as well as the use of learning analytics to support teachers and institutions. He has led several interdisciplinary European Union projects, and he is currently editor of the British Journal of Education and Technology. We welcome Manolis. So let me explain how we are going to do this. First, I'm going to ask them a question, and they will give us their first impressions. Then we will have a round of discussion between our three experts. And at the end, we will welcome your questions through a Padlet. I don't know if the Padlet. So we will share with you a QR code so you can scan. And as you listen to their participations, you can submit your questions through the Padlet. So at the end, we can do this more of a conversation and not just we talking about among ourselves. Los invitamos y les invitamos a que participen con nosotros en esta conversación sobre la IA. Entonces vamos a proyectar por aquí un código QR para que puedan ir poniendo sus preguntas en un Padlet y al final de esta sesión empezaremos a discutir respecto a sus cuestionamientos. Perfecto. This is weird. Okay, bueno. So the first question that I want to ask you is really AI transforming education? And if it does, what does transformation means? La primera pregunta que quiero hacerles a nuestros panelistas es si en realidad la inteligencia artificial está transformando a la educación y si sí la está transformando, ¿en qué consiste esa transformación? ¿Cómo podríamos definirla o cómo podríamos observarla en nuestra práctica? So I don't know which one of you want to start.
Thank you. And so firstly, before I answer the question, I just want to say thank you to the organizers and Ibero for the invitation to be here with you today. I'm really pleased. But I also want to say thank you to all you guys in the audience here that, you know, it's late in the day and yet you're still here. So thank you very much to you guys as well. So is AI transforming education? I'm not convinced it is transforming education. Is it impacting? Yes, it is impacting in quite a big way. And I think one of the things that's interesting about these technologies is historically in education, technologies came in from the top. So the IT department, the school principal or whatever would bring technology into the classroom, or maybe the teacher. But all of a sudden, when we had ChatGPT suddenly appearing just over 2 years ago, AI was just streaming into the classroom from the bottom, from students wanting to use it in different ways. And now we're in a situation where new technologies are being developed, as we've seen today, but equally there's a lot of craziness going on, and a lot of schools, a lot of universities, they really don't know what to do. They're going around in circles. They want to preserve what they've always been doing, and they think AI should support that, but at the same time, clearly AI is undermining many of those things, such as assessment. So is it impacting? Yes. Is it transforming? I think we're too early to say. And what I should have begun with is, what are we talking about? Are we talking about generative AI? Are we talking about AI more generally? Because AI has been coming into education, you know, for at least a decade commercially, and from research much, much longer than that. And those kind of tools, they are changing things, but it's a very slow incremental process. But when Gen AI appeared, suddenly it just exploded. So yeah, I think, what do we mean by transformation?
Yo soy Abraham Mena. Gracias a Libero por recibirnos. Gracias, Luis, otra vez. Yo sé que te encanta que lo digamos. No, no es cierto. Mira, yo vengo del sureste de México. ¿Conocen el sureste de México? Levanten su mano quien han visitado el sureste de México. Cada vez menos. Y bueno, el sureste de México, como todas las fronteras sures, la transformación no ha llegado en muchas de sus dimensiones. En temas de educación, es de las regiones del país con más atrasos, ¿no? Y igual otros atrasos como, por ejemplo, la llegada de la electricidad, ¿no? No tenemos sistemas eléctricos tan fuertes. Y si hablamos de Internet, también, ¿no? Entonces, hay que reconocer que el país es diverso, que las regiones del mundo son diversas ¿Y qué regiones en donde la transformación no llega? No existe ese concepto. Al contrario, la falta de transformación hace que las enfermedades abunden, ¿no? Que lo que llamamos progreso sea tenga un mayor contraste con el atraso, ¿no? Las migraciones del mundo pasan por el sureste de México. Y en ese sentido, el sistema educativo chiapaneco, el sistema educativo en el sur de México, tiene una brecha muy profunda. Inicia la brecha en el acceso a la electricidad y al agua, continúa con el acceso al Internet y a una educación que podemos decir de calidad, ¿no? Olvidemos las pedagogías críticas y otro tipo de pedagogías que aún no llegan, y no es porque el sureste de México no quieran que lleguen, simplemente es una zona en donde el sistema económico, pues solamente lo que quiere es extraer todo lo extraíble. Llega la inteligencia artificial y yo tengo la hipótesis que yo y una serie de colegas, que lo que la inteligencia artificial es aumentar la brecha digital entre los que pueden acceder a Internet y electricidad, los que pueden acceder a la inteligencia artificial y los que no acceden a la inteligencia artificial, ¿no? Entonces es una base en la que vamos a hablar. Lo siguiente, en el tema de educación, los profesores y los alumnos, las alumnas, las profesoras, están muy anclados a las tradicionales formas de dar educación y recibir educación. Hoy en una clase de doctorado, los chicos y las chicas preguntan, ¿qué voy a leer y qué debo de entregar para ser calificado? En ese sentido, los profesores continúan también con las viejas formas y tradicionales formas de evaluar, ¿no? En donde la inteligencia artificial la ven como un enemigo, ¿no? Esto que hemos platicado en el panel de la mañana, un enemigo que va a vulnerar la autoridad epistémica del adulto y del profesor, ¿no? Entonces, en ese sentido, yo creo que no hay una transformación, o sea, no ha llegado todavía al sureste de México algo que se parezca al concepto de transformación, y al contrario, las brechas entre quienes usan la inteligencia y quienes no las usan van a ser más amplias, ya de por sí amplias, en el acceso a las redes de Internet y a las tecnologías.
Interesting, thanks. Thank you for the invitation as well, and for hosting the panel and everything. The interesting thing with transforming is that you can also transform something in a negative way. So it's good to keep this in mind, I guess. I think I'm on this panel because I'm a bit more of an optimist, usually. And Louis here knows that. And I think there are areas where, as Wayne, you were saying just now, like there's some impact and some change. Whether we can consider this transformation, I'm not sure. I'll try to split it to talk differently about students and teachers for a minute. So in relation to students, there are many, Wayne hinted on this, that there's been many years of research and application of different artificial intelligence approaches that are not only about generative AI, that have been designed quite intentionally for learning. So we're not talking about commercial generative AI, but educational technology applications that are underpinned by some sort of AI approaches or other computational methods to help students with various aspects in relation to their learning, or even to their self-regulation, or even how to learn and work with other students. But again, I'm not talking about generative AI, and I think we have some lessons to learn from these areas of application to how maybe generative AI can be used to also do something similar. With teachers as well, for years, I guess there has been discussion around using data for decision making and for even understanding learning, even from a research perspective. And nowadays, I guess, if we look into areas of generative AI and how it affects it impacts or how teachers use it, basically. What I hear from teachers I'm working with, they're talking about using generative AI for developing lesson plans, maybe saving time for some tasks that might have taken them time and so on. Where I'm really interested and where I'm seeing some transformation, perhaps if I dare to say that, is that there is rapid advancement in the in fields that have to do with computing, basically with programming and so on. There's a remarkable ability of these generative AI models to develop code. And this has multiple implications. One is in relation to how people learn to program and how and what it means to program anymore, given the availability of these tools. But if we see it from a teacher perspective for a minute, and kind of wearing my teacher hat on many years ago, I'm excited by even the potential idea of being able to use generative AI to develop easily an application that explains, that can visualize concepts and explain abstract concepts in easy interactive ways that maybe 20 years ago would have taken a team of 10 people to develop. Now in 15 minutes, a teacher with some support and some appropriate tools in place, they can put quickly an application online, maybe for the students to do some activity that could be interactive. I've seen some examples of this. We have developed a platform that allows authoring some of these kind of activities. And I'm beginning to see some transformation there in terms of being able to even think about doing it when in the past would have been quite impossible. There are obviously some implications and risks there as well, but I'll leave it at that for now and discuss it later.
Thank you very much to all of you. So I think we can say it is here, we can't ignore it, but we need to maybe stop a little bit and think about what are we saying about it. We're saying it's transforming. Over here we said it has an impact. So let's study this impact, its implications, its darks and shadows and lights. It has lights, as you said. So, and maybe, I'm sorry. The thing that we need to do is start to learn from the past, because I think, well, for me, AI is like this magician, no? For most people see it like this is something unbelievable and it's brand new, but if we start to look at with a critical eye, we need to start defining terms like transformation, like the difference between AI and generative AI, and also look back at what technology has done to education in the past. And I think that's a very interesting way to look at it, to see how other technologies had impact education, what was the outcome of that impact, and if we can learn from that experience to show some light of what we can do with this technology that it is powerful, it's very powerful, it's very new, it is doing things that we weren't able to do before. And then that leaves us to the next part of the discussion about the risks. We know there are a lot of risk of using these technologies for education and in educational processes. So from your point of view, what are these risks that we should be really aware of, and we can start addressing them? Go.
Like, where to start with risks? I'll start with over-reliance. I think many people are talking about this. I think a couple of times earlier also this was mentioned. There is a risk in not knowing exactly when and if and how especially when we're talking about generative AI? What kind of tasks are useful to delegate or to replace maybe, and what kind of implications this has? Because it's not always clear at the heat of the moment when you're doing something, what is the implication on this, both to yourself and to your students perhaps, or if you are a student, to your future learning. And so yeah, maybe there's lots to discuss. Let's start with this and we can touch on other things after. I'm sure my colleagues have other things to add as well.
Sí. Yo creo que la educación, lo que nos enseñó la pandemia y esta época pospandémica es que la educación no se limita al área escolar, ¿no? La educación está en todos momentos, los celulares, en las casas. Y en ese sentido, la educación se ha transformado, bueno, si hay una forma de transformar es el espacio y el tiempo en el que nos estamos educando, ¿no? Por ejemplo, un riesgo que los profesores ven constantemente es la autoridad epistémica, ¿no? En donde los chicos sientan que mejor les enseña el chat GTP matemáticas que el profesor que no ha actualizado sus modelos, que no actualiza las pedagogías, ¿no? Entonces, la pregunta es, ¿el aprendizaje que tiene un alumno, una alumna de forma autónoma en el uso de inteligencia artificial sustituirá al profesor? Y con ese sentido, porque están aprendiendo, ya lo dijo Fernando en la mañana, ¿no? Chicos que pueden programar, diseñar un montón de cosas que no pasan por la escuela, ¿no? Y el gran riesgo que yo creo que vamos a experimentar en los próximos años es la propia existencia de la universidad tal y como la conocemos. En algunos seminarios públicos, académicas y académicos me dicen, es necesaria una tesis de titulación hoy en día, es necesaria una tesis de titulación en donde haya 20, 30 páginas de marco teórico, cuando eso lo puede sintetizar un buen prompt de inteligencia artificial, ¿no? En donde tú alimentes la inteligencia con bibliografía y le puedes hacer preguntas constantes a la inteligencia sin necesidad de que sea estática en un papel, ¿no? O bien entrenar sistemas de lenguajes para que platique contigo, como lo hace el Colmex, ¿no? Tú vas a poder platicar con los profesores que están ausentes ya, no solamente en sus obras escritas, vas a tener formas de preguntarle a los autores a partir de sus obras y dialogar con ellos como si estuvieran en la existencia. Entonces, la universidad tal y como la conocemos, es así la que se va a transformar, ¿no? Es el modelo de titulación, de entrega de trabajos, de tesinas, de hasta cómo presentar bibliografías, de cómo argumentar. Todo eso es lo que se tendría que transformar en una universidad, ¿no? Y por supuesto, el principal riesgo que tienen las universidades es seguir dándole la espalda a estos cambios tecnológicos porque tiene el riesgo de ser obsoleta, como muchas universidades hoy en día son en nuestras regiones. No dan soluciones, no damos soluciones. Los académicos no damos 3 pasos adelante, ¿no? Y quien principalmente corre riesgo es el alumnado. Un alumnado que está aburrido, un alumnado que está desesperado, un alumnado que tiene malestares porque no entiende por qué el profesor no integra modelos de inteligencia artificial en sus clases, ¿no? Y eso, ahorita que les dije de Chiapas de que estamos atrasados, sí, pero aún así se utiliza la inteligencia artificial, ¿no? Y muchos de los alumnos y alumnas que tienen acceso a esas inteligencias tienen una mejor posibilidad también de acceder a conocimientos, habilidades y hasta contactos, ¿no? Entonces, en ese sentido, el gran riesgo es aumentar la brecha y el gran riesgo que tiene la universidad es no hacer los cambios suficientes y entonces que la universidad sea un simplemente edificio en donde se reproducen los malos hábitos, las malas concepciones del mundo. That's all.
For me, there are a lot of risks. There are a huge number of risks. I think that the starting point is actually the distinction I like to make between the appearance of AI and the reality of AI. And constantly I hear people, I see people confusing these two. So we see what AI can do in theory. we're actually seeing just it's like we're looking through a peephole into the world. And the difference between what the AI appears to be able to do and what the AI systems can actually do has a whole list of things that follow from that. So what happens in particular is we give too much credibility to the AI system because it looks like it's human, because it looks like it's intelligent, because it looks like it understands what we've asked of it. We start to think it does all those things. We kind of feel it is intelligent, it does understand, and it really doesn't. And so this has a whole host of problems that then follow from it, because it's not simply that people become over-reliant on it in the sense that they need it all the time, but they take shortcuts with it. So I'm not suggesting that this was a good thing, but when we used to use Google all the time to do searching for information, it would give us a list of 15 things or on the first page, and we would choose one we would look at, and we would go to that page and look at that. And all the time we're thinking, we're processing, we're comparing different bits of information, we're comparing that with what we did before and what we already understood, and we're trying to work towards wherever we're trying to going, but it's a process of thinking, of engagement with the information. But now what we're seeing increasingly is people do their ChatGPT prompt. It gives them a piece of information and they copy and they paste. And they don't even read it because they're assuming that this stuff is accurate when we know it's not accurate. They're assuming that it's bias-free when we know it is not bias-free. And one of the ways in which this happens is because increasingly we're using, anthropomorphic terms. We're using human terms to describe this technology. So we refer to it as an intelligent technology. It is not an intelligent technology. We refer to it as machine learning. Well, it's a completely different thing that the machine learning tools do compared to what we as humans do. But because we use the same word, we kind of get confused in the discussion and we think, well, hang on a second, these things must be learning like we learn. And we make assumptions. So the reality is that that these myths that are perpetuated all the way down the line means that we're becoming overly dependent upon it, over reliant upon it, but we're beginning to understand it doing things that it's really not capable of doing. And as a consequence, this is promoting a huge industry who are making huge amounts of money, who are in complete control of the way these tools are being developed and the way they're being put out there. We don't have control. We don't have any of that. So when Sam Altman from OpenAI decides they want to launch something, well, it's there. We have no say over that. So those kind of things, those kind of ways in which these tools are being perpetuated by big industry, the ways in which we see it as being human, but it's really not. We see it as being smart, but it's really not. It is a huge problem. But before I've just finished on this one thing, one of the things that leads us into this is because the reality is this stuff does look human-like, right? It does when you type in your sentence and it responds with a sentence. It really does look human-like. It's really easy to get suckered into thinking, hey, this is been written by a human. It almost feels like there's someone at the other end of the telephone line who's replying to you, in reality, right? But yeah, but it's not. But because it's being sold as human-like, it's being perceived as human-like, it does appear as human-like. That means this is a different kettle of fish. It's not just another technology. Underneath, of course, it is a technology, but in its impact on us as humans. So these are the kind of risks that I think we should be very, very careful about.
I want to stop a minute there and go a little bit deeper in what you're saying, because it seems that one first step could be that we need to understand this technology, like from the inside, to put it in the right place and to understand what it can do and what it cannot do, and what we should ask it to do and what we should do by ourselves. So how do you think we can, I don't know, teach people, maybe is the word, to help them understand fully what these technologies and take out the myth that it is human or that it's intelligent or that it learns. How can we do that?
Well, I'm going to come in back on it because you had two goes last time. Manolis and I have worked together for many years. So what I would argue for very strongly is that we need to help our teachers and our students, and frankly, everybody in society, to become critically AI literate. And what does that mean? You know, it means having a vague idea of how the technology works so you can interpret what it brings out. So if you understand that generative AI, it's only predicting the most likely next word. So there's no connection with facts, no connection with accuracy, no connection with understanding. It's just predicting the next word. So when our teachers can understand that, then I think they can understand, well, hang on a second, this paragraph is just given me. How do I interpret that? So I think that's very important. A lot of literacy work actually these days focuses on the practicality. How can we implement this in a classroom? And we always have the word responsibly, right? How can we responsibly use this? But maybe one of the answers to that question is frequently we shouldn't be using it in education. We need to have these discussions. But the third area is the impact of these technologies on all of us, on our agency, on our human rights, if we're working with children, on child rights, on the environment. So all those kind of things. On the history of AI, where it's come from, the fact that AI, a lot of it was developed through work with the military. The fact that generative AI was fine-tuned by some incredibly poorly paid workers in places like Kenya and Venezuela and elsewhere. So these kind of things, I think it's important for everyone to understand. Now, but your question was, how do we teach them this? How do we get them to understand this? And we have lots of teachers in the audience, so I'm not going to tell teachers how to teach, but I think we do need to focus on that. I'm interested in helping teachers and students to understand the issues so that they can make informed choices as to when to use the technology and when not to use the technology. So I don't tell anybody, I don't tell my colleagues, I don't tell my students to use it or not use it, but I do try to help them understand the complexities, the background, the history, the impact on humans, so that hopefully they can make informed choices about when and whether and how to use it.
Pues buena pregunta, porque la universidad, la escuela tal y como la conocemos, en los estudios que hemos realizado sobre violencia de género en espacios digitales, por ejemplo, observamos que las universidades y las escuelas son uno de los principales lugares en donde las violencias se generan y se reproducen y se aprenden. Y muchos de las familias que hemos acompañado nos reportan, ¿no? El uso excesivo primero de Internet para la reproducción de la violencia, ¿no? Y de la interacción de la violencia. Pero con la llegada de inteligencia artificial, el diálogo que tiene el ser humano con estas dinámicas de inteligencia artificial hacen que esa violencia tenga otro nicho, ¿no? En donde aún no sabemos cómo entrarle. Déjenme platicarles que eso que platicaba ahorita el profesor, cómo explicarle a un joven que no tiene que la inteligencia sea su confidente. O sea, que no te va a dar que no hay una persona dentro del aparato, porque para ellos es un aparato con el que dialogan. Es como una bola mágica en donde él les dice estoy triste y la inteligencia te pregunta por qué y así, pum, pum, pum. Entonces, en su capacidad cognitiva, para ellos no es una máquina, es una persona pequeña que les está dando consejos y eso les friquea mucho a los padres y a las madres, a los profesores. ¿Cómo le explico a mi hijo que están entrando a un mundo desconocido para mí como adulto, ¿no? Y en ese sentido yo creo que tendremos que desarrollar capacidades en las universidades para poder explicar a los alumnos que su conciencia crítica debe ser más robusta de la que en otras generaciones pudimos desarrollar, ¿no? Todo ese sentido, yo les digo a los chicos cuando doy talleres en las primarias, en las secundarias, confía en tu papá, en tu mamá o en algún adulto. No confíes en la inteligencia artificial en temas muy particulares, ¿no? No te quiere, no te va a dar un consejo afectuoso, ¿no? Pero terminan por no entenderlo, ¿no? Y en ese sentido tenemos que desarrollar nosotros los adultos, los que más o menos intentamos ir un paso o medio paso adelantito, tampoco muchos, subir contenidos en las redes que los chicos consuman, ¿no? Hace rato les propuse, subamos contenidos en TikTok, porque eso son lo que consumen los chicos de forma aleatoria, ¿no? En donde podamos explicar, en donde la universidad sea corresponsable social del desarrollo de estas explosiones tecnológicas que nos van a llevar a mundos que aún intentamos imaginar, pero que no terminan de llegar. Y como dijo Luis, cada 3 semanas se reinventa el código y el orden de cómo relacionarnos con este tipo de tecnologías.
Yeah, it's very challenging because I think even if we didn't have the problems that you were outlining, like accuracy problems or biases or which I think in a few years there probably some of these will disappear, or there are even already some ways. We'll come here in 10 years and we can discuss it again, okay? And there are already approaches to address some of these issues. But the problem with your example of copying pasting, even if it was accurate, what you have, even if it was guaranteed that somehow it's accurate, the challenge is what you were hinting as well, that basically, how do you help someone understand that it's not the output that we are interested, it's the process of getting to this. So it's fine maybe in 10 years to get the output, but we need to develop, I don't know, interventions or examples of how to show, to demonstrate that basically you're not learning by just copying, pasting it, and that the process of the homework is not because we want you to painstakingly just write something, but it's because you're learning by writing. And I don't know, it needs behavioral change equivalent to how would you convince people that it's better to walk up the stairs rather than take the lift? And maybe actually this lift metaphor is not so bad, because similarly to the lift basically changes the task of what it means to go up the stairs, to go up one floor. And what's happening also with generative AI is that it's changing the task of what it means to write something. It just completely changes it. And that's, again, both the risk, but there must be a way. And you said the teachers around us, and we are trying also with our students to show with examples, either from research or from even practice, what this would mean. You mentioned before the journal editor. There is already papers that are coming out that are demonstrating clearly that the use of these tools might be effective in the short term and even contribute to learning gains for the students. But in the long term, there are implications. One paper that comes to mind is some colleagues are referring to this idea of metacognitive laziness, that basically the more you use the tool, you become metacognitive lazy. And I think I'm sharing this paper to whoever I can, including my own students, my children, but it would be nice to be able to, maybe through some practice, through some activities. I think you can quickly see that if you do 3, 4 tasks, you might be quickly forgetting what you did in the first task. So it might easily demonstrate and ring a bell about not using it in this way.
So can I just chip in here? Because I think one of the problems is that helping people to understand the best way to interact with the tools, I get that. But the problem is if they don't understand the background, I still don't think they're making rational judgments about when and how and where to use it. So so I think that's really important. But I also wanted to add to your thing about the process. I completely agree with you. And somebody said this, I didn't come up with this, but it's really, we as academics, we often ask our students to write essays. Yeah, we do that a lot. But we don't do that because the world needs more student essays. We're not in the I don't have on my wall at home all my students' essays thinking, hey, I've got more. We do it because it's the process. And if the students are not going through that process, then it's a complete waste of effort. And so we need our students to understand this. But so long as we're in a system which the value is on the output, be it an essay, be it an examination, so long as that's the system we live in, then no wonder students are going to go that direction. So it's not just about, coming back to the transformation question, I think maybe for me, one of the best things to come out of the arrival of generative AI so dramatically is that people are beginning to think about what we actually mean by education, what we want to assess, how we might go about assessing it, how we decide what is effective and what is not. So those kind of conversations I think are really important, and they have increased because of generative AI.
So you started the conversation. Let's continue that conversation.
Una cosa que se me ocurrió, mi hijo está estudiando para entrar a la universidad. Y todavía hace 5 años, 6 años, tomamos apuntes en cuaderno, ¿no? Y hoy los chicos no lo necesitan, o sea, no necesitan tomar apuntes en un cuaderno de papel, como nosotros, para estudiar, para reflexionar, ¿no? Sus notas las hacen en otros lados, y si ya cuando me enseñan las notas así, ¿no? O sea, antes todavía nos dábamos las preguntas en papel y decíamos, la pregunta aquí está, ¿no? Es algo físico que yo puedo ver. Entonces, los chicos están entrando a otras dimensiones que los adultos no estamos entendiendo, no podemos decodificar, no porque no queramos, ¿no? Sino porque simplemente el mundo cambió tan rápido y eso sí es un riesgo, o sea, es un choque de 2 generaciones, ¿no? Que obligamos, el propio examen de la UNAM, ¿no? Es un examen todavía en papel que tienes que poner, tienes que aprender las respuestas de forma. La conciencia crítica que intentaste, ya lo platiqué en la mañana, desarrollar en los niños, cuando son tus hijos chiquitos, no les sirve de mucho en otro mundo, en otros espacios universitarios, porque les exigen todavía formas de examinarse del siglo pasado, ¿no? Y entonces, en ese sentido, las universidades otra vez vuelven a perder un montón de oportunidades, porque el mundo cambió, porque los chicos cambiaron, y quienes gobiernan las universidades siguen muy clavados a procesos del siglo pasado.
So in that chain of ideas, what do you think, or how do you think we need to? We're saying that if AI transform education, but apparently education needs to be transformed, not that AI transformed it. So how can we transform these educational systems, these institutions? What do you think will be kind of a first step for shifting this idea and
You want an answer now?
just your thoughts.
Just our thoughts. I think it really depends on the context and the whether we're talking about higher education or schooling and so on. It's really a whole system change. It's not just what I do in a class with my students. It's what Wayne said earlier about kind of understanding that it's not just the output, and that even the system, kind of even the examination system, demanding a different type of accreditation, for example. So it really needs to bring several people together, like policy, I don't know, instructional designers, professors who are teaching individual students, and so on, and recognizing these tools. I mentioned before the main transformation where it's happening already immediately, is in computing education. Because in computing education, it has become clear that you need to understand the fundamentals of computational thinking, and that whether we like it or not, there will be no need to actually develop the code itself, like line by line, like we used to do 20 years ago. And so this has changed already how people are assessing or what they're expecting the students to use. And again, I'm not talking necessarily about commercial AI. There are other tools that can achieve the same things. And the problem with commercial AI partly is that they have an incentive to make the tools easier to use rather than focusing on learning, for example. But maybe we can learn something from the colleagues who are already facing this challenge in terms of how they're changing their assessment. So the assessment anymore, for example, is not so much in whether you develop the code and the system works or not, but it's about how you collaborated with your colleagues. They do more peer assessment, for example, in terms of the process, or they challenge the students to bring interdisciplinary groups together to work on a project, and therefore, even in an area where you would think it's more hard skill in terms of computing, there's beginning to be recognition around skills or competencies that have to do more with what some people used to call kind of soft skills in terms of collaboration, communication, and so on. So hopefully, maybe this can change also in other areas. And I don't know, we were discussing earlier as well about, it might seem as a very big change, but I think you were saying earlier, like we're individuals and maybe we can change something each in our own little course that we're teaching, and hopefully this will kind of scale up gradually.
Yo ahorita que estoy viendo salir a las alumnas con su uniforme y conectado con la pregunta que le hicieron a la ponente magistral de qué opinaba que la certificación universitaria ya no tiene el mismo valor que antes tenía y que hoy las empresas buscan a las personas que tienen la habilidad, independientemente si lo aprenden en la universidad o no. Y ahorita que las vi salir dije, están súper aburridas, ¿no? O sea, estos modelos a lo mejor de diálogo, hay una edad en la que no tienen sentido, ¿no? Que a lo mejor si se los dijéramos por chat estarían más entretenidas de nuestra discusión que si nos escuchan hablar. Lo que quiero decir es que yo creo que el modelo universitario ya dio lo que tenía que dar, ¿no? Tal vez dentro de 10 años que vengamos ya no exista una Ibero tal y como la conocemos, porque el modelo ya fue, o sea, y en ese sentido, ¿qué hay que construir sobre estos modelos? Otra cosa diversa, ¿no? En donde los sistemas de certificación tal y como los conocemos, los salones tal y como los conocemos, la competencia que en las universidades se dan para las becas y quién es el mejor y el cuadro de honor y el profesor, hasta la misma forma de hacer ciencia, hoy nos estamos cuestionando, neta, que es importante el artículo tal y como lo conocemos, un artículo que hoy tú envías y que es dictaminado y sale en un año y medio. ¿Qué validez tiene de un dato que produjiste hace 5 años y que apenas se va a publicar dentro de un año? Entonces, yo creo que sí el sistema está haciendo crisis, ¿no? Y lo observamos ¿en qué? En la disminución de matrículas de las escuelas públicas, privadas, ¿no? En el desánimo del estudiantado por las opciones que existen en las regiones, ¿no? Por las crisis que los profesores tienen. Yo constantemente escucho a los profesores, no sé qué hacer, ¿no? Y no hay quien me pueda explicar qué es lo que tengo que hacer. O la generación que se está por jubilar en las universidades que se van hasta el gorro porque ya no entienden cómo entrarle a estos nuevos modelos de educación, ¿no? Yo creo que la pandemia sí nos dio vean su realidad y la inteligencia artificial nos los volvió a observar con una lupa más grande, ¿no? Vean todos los errores que hemos cometido como sistema de transmisión del conocimiento, ¿no? Y veámonos tal y como somos, ¿no? En ese sentido, yo creo que la universidad, tal y como la conocemos en muchas formas, en sus muchas presentaciones, privada, pública, chica, grande, local, global, eh, tendrá que cambiar en los próximos años, según yo.
Well, I think encouraging teachers to explore and use the technology is fundamental, but I don't think it's enough. I think to go back to the critical literacy, we still need the critical AI literacy. We still need teachers to understand the complications, the background, the implications. And once they've got that, then also to explore and play and see what happens. And for me, that's very much that's a bottom-up approach, and it's an important approach. But I think we also need a top-down approach. So I'm guessing that for most people in this audience, you would not go to a coffee bar and meet somebody who says, "Hey, I've got some really good drugs. Why don't you try them?" Most of us would say, no, go, I'm not interested. I'm prepared to take medicines that I know have gone through a rigorous testing process and that have been prescribed to me by an expert, a doctor. And I've been given in the prescription, this is how you should take this particular medicine. That's what we do with medicines. But when it comes to technologies being used in education, we don't do that. What happens is we do get offered it in the pub, or we get somebody knocking on our door saying, "Hey, you really should try my technology." And so what this means is that we are effectively experimenting on our students. Now, I'm all for experimentation under proper, rigorous, ethically controlled conditions, but I'm really not into the idea of experimenting on children when they don't even have a say in what's going on. Most often, the teacher might say, "Hey, I got this tool, let's use it, let's explore." You know, when we're talking about the physical body, we're all agreed we need to have good, robust testing and experts involved. But when it comes to the developing mind, suddenly that goes all out the window. No, we can just, it sounds cool. We can do what we like. And so when I mention this to people, they often say, "Well, but teachers have been doing that forever." But the difference is we're talking about one teacher in one classroom, one set of students. With these technologies, we're talking about hundreds, thousands of teachers working with tens or hundreds of thousands of students. So that kind of level of experimentation on students, I think, is unacceptable. So so I've said the bottom up is the AI, the critical AI literacy. For me, the top down is we need legislation. We need some kind of regulation. And so this doesn't have a great deal to bear in Mexico, but in Europe, Council of Europe, we are developing, and the language is a legal instrument to regulate the use of AI in educational settings to protect human rights, democracy, the rule of law. So if we're successful, and like any legislation, it's a long, slow process. But it means, I hope, that we will, you know, it's kind of like the time when the Spanish invaded Mexico and people were doing anything, we're grabbing anything, we're doing what we like. You know, medicine is plants, is whatever. It's just a free for all. And in a sense, in the world of AI and education, that's where we are today. So we need to move forward to a position where we can be more confident that the tools actually do what they say they do and that they do so safely. At the moment, we just don't have that.
Well, thank you all for sharing all these interesting ideas of how to transform education and the place that technology and AI has in this equation. And now we want to open the discussion to the public. So please, if somebody in the audience wants to say something or wants to share an idea or answer one of the questions that they just answered, please, there's a microphone in the middle of the auditorium. Si alguien quisiera compartir alguna pregunta, alguna idea, contestar alguna de las preguntas que contestaron nuestros expertos, es momento de que dejemos descansar sus gargantas.
Gracias, buenas tardes. Mire, nosotros, la compañera y yo, trabajamos en educación básica. El tema de la inteligencia artificial la empezamos a escuchar no hace mucho, en las discusiones colectivas, en las discusiones académicas. Y aunque la escuchamos aproximadamente hace 3, 4 años, no tuvo eco. No tuvo eco en quien conducía los procesos de aprendizaje entre los colectivos. Se empezó a dar, y particularmente la empezamos a tomar en consideración, a iniciativa precisamente de un grupo de profesoras y de profesores que nos conjuntamos en una comunidad de aprendizaje, así le llamamos, y ahí entre nosotros empezamos a compartir experiencias. Ya después nos llamó la atención cuando en alguna universidad, como hoy, por ejemplo, la Ibero, nos enteramos de un evento que comparte también este tipo de saberes. Y esto lo comento porque, por lo menos en el subsistema del Estado de México, el estatal, vemos un gran abismo entre el uso de la inteligencia con lo que estamos viendo, por ejemplo, en educación superior. Y de ahí viene la pregunta: ¿cómo podríamos conectar lo que es la educación básica con la educación superior para que tuviéramos un impulso en ese nivel, en el uso de la inteligencia artificial? Gracias.
Claro, pero imagino que en todos los países debe tener la misma pregunta, ¿no?
So when they're saying basic education, what, like elementary? Okay. K-12, K-9.
Y entonces, al profesor, déjeme decirle que los alumnos, así como los observamos, tienen autoridad epistémica sobre el uso de la tecnología. Ahí yo lo que les propondría a los profesores es cambiar la ecuación, ¿no? Es volver a ser alumnos y que ellos te muestren y te enseñen las cosas que descubren en la inteligencia artificial. O sea que tenemos que dejar de enseñar para aprender, ¿no? Eso es muy importante. Lo primerito que yo le recomiendo a los profesores de educación básica es preguntar a sus alumnos qué saben ellos de la inteligencia o de las tecnologías, ¿no? Ahora, la conexión entre los diferentes niveles de educación en México, pues la respuesta casi todos lo sabemos, es muy complicada, ¿no? Los diferentes estados, en los diferentes subsistemas, es realmente complicado porque no hay o al menos no detecto yo una línea clara de conexión entre los subsistemas, entre los niveles. Y en ese sentido hay que construirla, ¿no? El material que preparó Anúñez y Leibero sobre qué políticas tendría que tomar el Estado es eso, es tomar las riendas de un fenómeno global, ¿no? Como la inteligencia artificial, en donde no somos dependientes de muchas tecnologías, ¿no? No hemos desarrollado la suficientes personal, ni dedicamos recursos económicos para ello. Entonces el Estado tiene que tomar ese papel, ¿no? No dejárselos a las iniciativas privadas, porque hay un filósofo que invité eh, a uno de los seminarios donde me dice, hay partes del profesorado que sí observan que la inteligencia está trabajando extractivistamente del conocimiento de las personas, ¿no? Así como bien desconfiada de la inteligencia artificial. Y hay que darle un poco de razón a estas personas que piensan que estamos donando conocimientos globales, ¿no? Las 24 horas del día sobre sentimientos, esperanzas y saberes, ¿no? O sea, ¿qué cantidad de modelajes estamos nosotros donando idealmente al conocimiento universal, pero que están utilizando las empresas y quién sabe los fines que vayan a tener? Entonces, en resumen, profesor, mi recomendación sería preguntar a los alumnos, a los jóvenes, qué saben de inteligencia artificial, nosotros los adultos ser sus alumnos, ¿no? Vamos a aprender más rápido además, Y otra es que las directivas, por ejemplo, hoy que estuvo el director de la Ibero, creo que la Ibero tiene una gran responsabilidad social con un montón de universidades y lo está haciendo. Nos convoca, nos trae, nos pone a discutir, nos pone a diseñar. Entonces, esa experiencia que tiene la Ibero está muy bien usada, ¿no? ¿Al servicio de quién? Pues del pueblo, ¿no? De la gente que tiene esas dudas y de los funcionarios y de los senadores que tomarán decisiones en políticas públicas en relación a la inteligencia artificial, pues ya tienen otro documento más guía que les pueda hacer que legislen a favor del desarrollo de políticas claras y de la asignación de recursos para este tipo de estudios.
Yeah, if I can add something, I think also it's a very good question, and I'm probably the wrong person to address it somehow, but I think the universities also have a responsibility in that. And I mean, bringing communities like this together, which is what this university is doing, but I think state universities as well should have some sort of role in acting as a sort of liaison to be able to bring the knowledge that is inside the university as well to both to the general public, let alone to teachers and schools and students. And I think when you had these examples before about what people should understand or not understand, or other workshops, what I was saying about kind of playing with technology and so on. I think in many countries, or maybe at least in the European Union, what is emerging is this idea of a community of practice. You already have a community of practice. There are now processes and methods by which this community of practice is better supported, and usually I see the role of the state or the university to be able to kind of boost this up, to be able to help everyone reflect on what is it that they're learning, in this case, AI literacy or critical AI literacy. There should be some, we can't necessarily expect always top down for this to happen, and maybe it needs more of a community approach to be able to help everyone to reflect.
The first thing I wanted to say is the idea of you guys coming together in communities to discuss and explore is fantastic, and congratulations, and keep doing that. But the question is, how can you go further? And I would suggest two things. I mean, Manoj already mentioned, this event is a good event. So demand of your universities more events like this. But you shouldn't just be listening to us talk. People talk on the stage. It also should be about you workshopping together, I think. And the other thing I would say, and again, you need to demand this of this university and others, is go out of your way to criticize the technologies you're exploring. So yes, you explore a technology, you find out what it can do, but then step back and think, well, hang on a second, what implications does what it does have for me as a human, for my students as learners, for the relationship between my students? I say, take that critical step back. And one of the other things you could demand of here is that they translate my books into Spanish, and then you can read those too, which will obviously be a really good thing.
Ya se puede con la inteligencia artificial.
It's going to be full of mistakes.
Possible now.
That you can translate it with AI, but it's going to be full of mistakes if you do that. And he's not using.
Hay que pedirle permiso a la editorial.
Hola, buenas tardes. Bueno, agradezco mucho estas mesas de debate y que la universidad haga este esfuerzo por invitarnos a aquellos que no tenemos justamente formación en educación o en pedagogía. Sin embargo, quisiera compartir algunas inquietudes que se me han ido generando desde la primera ponencia en la mañana. Y una de ellas es decir que sí, claro que inteligencia artificial es un reto, pero también recuerdo que cuando estaba en la universidad fue un reto que nosotros teníamos computadora y nuestros profesores no, que ellos escribieron sus tesis en máquinas mecánicas y nosotros ya teníamos computadora y teníamos acceso a navegación en Yahoo, No sé si alguien sea como de mi edad, pero eso era lo que ocurría. Entonces, también implicó un reto. Y entonces voy a diferir un poquito. No creo que eso haya acabado la universidad. No, volvió a los profesores, a los docentes más creativos. Entonces nos impusimos retos, pero también creo que intentaron fomentar el conocimiento, volver a encontrar las explicaciones desde otro lugar, intentar ser críticos, argumentar. Creo que en tiempos de inteligencia artificial lo que debemos de fomentar es el análisis crítico y las posturas analíticas que la inteligencia artificial no tiene per se. En particular, soy del área de economía, doy algunas materias un tanto cuanto técnicas y es muy curioso porque de repente yo oigo aquí que 90% de los trabajos son plagiados y yo digo, pues mis alumnos van y los plagian del peor lugar del mundo o todavía van a Rincón del Vago porque me entregan muchas cosas mal hechas. ¿Por qué? Porque los cuestionas, los sacas en un lugar donde no esté la respuesta dentro de un motor de búsqueda de la inteligencia artificial. Y creo que sí es verdad, está cambiando quizá el paradigma de cómo acercar el conocimiento. Sin embargo, sí tenemos que garantizar que tengan un conocimiento. En economía yo tenía una maestra en métodos estadísticos que decía, pueden usar cualquier software, pero lo que en realidad nunca se va a perder y va a permanecer es el conocimiento que hay detrás de esa utilización de software. Y creo que quizá hoy como nunca tiene sentido esas palabras que me decía la maestra. En ese entonces era para paquetes estadísticos. Hoy lo pienso, puedes tú, si tú metes basura en la inteligencia artificial, pues te devuelve basura. Hoy mismo en la mañana veía que dentro de las 10 lecturas más recomendadas en varios periódicos del sur de América, salió un libro de Isabel Allende que ni siquiera ha escrito, porque quien escribió la columna le pidió a la inteligencia artificial que le diera los 10 libros más recomendables del año. Entonces creo que hay que aprender esto, como a ser muy críticos con la inteligencia artificial, pero sí saber que tiene que haber ahí conocimientos. Y ahí sí yo quisiera preguntarles a ustedes que son expertos en educación, en pedagogía. Veo que hay algunas tendencias en algunos países del norte de Europa de alejar los dispositivos tecnológicos y volver a recuperar la libreta, volver a escribir a mano. Yo he estado los últimos 5 o 6 años en este debate y testeo a veces, dejo que hagan apuntes como quieran y la siguiente clase retomo un ejercicio que he estado haciendo y no me saben decir ni siquiera que pregunté cuando están con todos los dispositivos a la mano. Y en los grupos donde hago el test de que tienen que anotar en papel, siempre saben decirme en qué punto estamos. Entonces creo que quizá también a lo mejor estamos sobrevalorando lo que ya están en contacto con la tecnología y sobrevaloramos quizá estas capacidades que todavía no les ayudan en momentos más jóvenes de la formación a organizar su conocimiento a partir solamente de dispositivos y de software. Entonces creo que, aunque no nos guste, a lo mejor hay ciertas formas de enseñanza y ciertas áreas de conocimiento que aún vale la pena que sí se acerquen a un lápiz, a una pluma, a una hoja y lo piensen 2 veces antes de dar un enter. Y creo que en medida que dejemos de pensar, es que ellos saben mucho más que nosotros, finalmente ahí vamos todos alfabetizándonos un poco, quizá más viéndonos como pares de conocimiento en las áreas tecnológicas, también podemos avanzar y sí decirles, no menosprecies escribir, porque esto te lleva a que no hay un enter y que tienes que encontrar un resultado a partir de la inteligencia natural, no artificial.
En-
Yo, así rápida, maestra, si usted mete en el prompt que su trabajo tenga algunas fallas ortográficas, también se lo hace, ¿eh? O sea, no confío mucho en que porque está mal hecho, no lo hizo la inteligencia. Pero sí, yo creo, algo que hemos aprendido es que los seres humanos aprendemos de formas diversas, ¿no? No todos aprendemos en papel, como no todos aprenden haciendo mapas conceptuales, como no todos aprenden, o sea, todos aprendemos distinto. Y a lo mejor, si usted me dijera, ¿qué valor puede dar la inteligencia artificial? Es eso, ¿verdad? Puede, puede adaptar el aprendizaje de una forma más gentil, ¿no? Eh, cómo, por ejemplo, ahorita con Jamie estamos en un curso de doctorado, es preguntar a los chicos cómo se imaginan que podemos evaluarnos mutuamente, ¿no? Y en ese sentido, la inteligencia sí puede crear herramientas, puede crear estrategias, puede ayudarte a crear formas. A mí me recomendó, haz una obra de teatro, entonces ahí tienes al profesor de doctorado haciendo una obra de teatro para abordar una lectura, ¿no? Cuando un profesor se iba a poner a hacer una obra de teatro, un monólogo, y entonces, bueno, ayuda a mi inteligencia para hacerme el guión, ¿no? Entonces ya me haces el guión y yo hago la obra de teatro, pero yo la hago, yo la actúo, etcétera. Entonces, en ese sentido, yo creo que obligar a los chicos a usar lápiz, papel, sí y no, ¿no? Yo creo que sí tenemos que aprender a respetar las diversidades de aprendizaje, ¿no? No cometer otra vez los mismos errores que cometieron con nosotros. Tienes que tomar apuntes, tienes que enumerar las páginas, tienes… Yo creo que la inteligencia sí nos va a ayudar como herramienta a diversificar las formas en que aprendemos y regresamos el aprendizaje, ¿no? Y claro, yo creo que todo vale, o sea, yo creo que ahí sí las formas en que el profesor y el alumnado podemos trabajar más en forma horizontal, yo creo que es un reto interesante, el cual esta herramienta nos puede ayudar, ¿no?
I love your optimism, but I find it really hard to share. So again, let's meet in 10 years and have a look back. I think the problem is that, you know, you mentioned at the beginning the notion of challenges, and you see this is, we had the challenge when we got computers in the classroom, we had the challenge when we got the interactive whiteboard in the classroom, we got the challenge when we get the internet in the classroom, and now the new challenge, we have AI systems. But again, the point I made earlier, AI systems are not just another one in the line of those earlier technologies. That's the real problem. It's the way in which they mimic us, and they do it in ways that are convincing. And because of that quite important distinction between AI systems and every previous technology, it's not just another challenge. It's a qualitatively different challenge. And I think it's really important that we engage. So, you know, I completely appreciate the research you and your team are doing. I think it's important. I value it. I want you to do more. But I think we still need to go back and think about the background of these technologies. It's not just about, are they useful for helping children to learn in the classroom? You know, one of the ways in which we can do it, and we were talking about this earlier, make it simple. When a baby is born, we shoot a chip into their head that has all of Wikipedia on it. We won't need any learning, right? It'll be easy. But that's the logical conclusion if we're not careful. So I think we need to be very, very clear about what this technology appears as and what this technology actually is, and be very careful. So yes, we need to do practical experimentation with it, to explore it, absolutely. But that has to be grounded in the background, in how it actually works, what its actual impact is. If we don't do that, then I'm really concerned we're going off in the completely wrong direction, and education and learners will begin to suffer.
Thank you, Wayne. We have time for one final question.
Thank you. So my question is, how can you tell I'm not a robot or a bot? I'm joking. My real question is because I want to be optimistic, but I'm not so optimistic when it comes to AI. And I'm inspired by what the professor over there said in terms of using it at the K-12 level. So my question is, if at any point we should use AI at these very early developmental stages, how and what should an AI literacy curriculum include? Or if your opinion is, no, let's not use it at these early developmental stages, then I think we would be all very grateful to hear as to why. What are the dangers entail or the challenges entail, Or what should we be learning before we get to use AI at these very early stages of development?
Big question. There are some tasks that I think we shouldn't be using it, if that's your question, because it can really blow up your mind and completely diminish your motivation for learning. Writing, for example, I don't know, writing a poem for a 9-year-old. I wouldn't encourage doing this. Maybe the 9-year-old will discover it alone, and then it's a different discussion that you can have. But if, as in a teaching context, using it becomes, I think, changes the discussion completely. Luis in the morning mentioned Seymour Papert. I'm constructionist in nature, generally the types of activities that we do. I think I would use their AI in constructionist ways. It is possible. And simultaneously, both in order to build something or to understand how it works and use this as an opportunity. For example, there are tools nowadays that I think maybe some of you know Scratch, where young children develop programs and games and small animations for their friends, for their parents, whatever. It is possible to do this now with AI, right? And there are ways that you can basically just open the hood and understand what's happening behind it and use this as an opportunity, not as an output again, not as an end game, but as a process by which you can reflect about what this means in relation to what you want to learn or you don't want to learn, and to open up the discussions that Wayne was saying earlier around how does it work, what does it do, and encourage critical thinking in relation to appropriate discussions at the different ages. That would be, I can see that you could have this discussion with even, at all ages with different implications, obviously, about what it means. I don't know if it answers your question, but it is possible to try this kind of things.
Querida, yo no tengo respuesta, pero la experiencia en la última década, tal vez menos, por lo menos en el sureste de México, no sé qué pasa en la Ciudad de México, las paternidades otorgaron al celular y al iPad un lugar predominante en el mundo infantil. Ya con eso la inteligencia está entrando en aplicaciones, en diálogos, en películas, ¿no? En películas interactivas que le encanta tanto a las infancias, ¿no? Y en ese sentido, pues ya entró la inteligencia a sus vidas, ¿no? O sea, esta lectura de conductas, de prácticas, de hábitos que tenemos todos, ¿no? Bueno, quien tiene relojes inteligentes, pues igual tiene, o los lentes, ¿verdad, Luis? Ya tiene su inteligencia ahí, ¿no? Y entonces, y eso pues en muchos sectores de la población, ¿no? Muchos, o sea, la gente que tiene mucho varo, la que tiene poco, todos están ya muy inmersas en ese mundo de la inteligencia. Desde las recetas de cocina de masa pan, dime cómo hago el pan de masa madre. Entonces te da una cantidad de perfil, te está leyendo constantemente la inteligencia a partir de la interacción que tú estás haciendo en la red, ¿no? Eso es como la realidad así plana. ¿Qué hacer? Eso me preguntan los profesores, ¿no? O sea, aunque yo no use inteligencia artificial en el salón, los chicos lo usan toda la tarde, desde que salen de clases, la usan. Entonces es una tensión en los salones. Maestra, ¿por qué hacemos todo ese camino tan largo cuando puede ser más corto si usamos y le explican a la maestra cómo usan la inteligencia artificial? En ese sentido, yo creo que el diálogo entre profesores, familias e infancias tiene que establecerse de una forma muy clara. Y el Estado y las escuelas y los directivos no la quieren dar en muchos sectores. Entonces yo sí sería de la idea de que familias, infancias y el profesorado con la directiva lleguemos a acuerdos, ¿no? En donde, no porque no lo uses en la escuela, ¿no? O sea, los chicos están aprendiendo no sé si si la palabra sea aprender, están expuestos a una cantidad de elementos relacionados con la inteligencia artificial, ¿no? Que les crean mundos mágicos, imágenes, canciones, poemas, colores, ¿no? Y ese sí es un problemón.
Well, we run out of time. I think we heard so many interesting ideas of all the discussions we need to have regarding education, regarding learning, regarding teacher, regarding assessment, regarding technology, regarding AI and AI, generative AI. So the conversation will still be open. I think this, as we said, these kind of activities encourage us to look for new ideas to transform our profession and to transform, starting with the little things we can do as individuals and then transform whole systems and institutions. So I want to thank you, Wayne, Abraham, and Malvis. And we have a little present for you guys.
Thank you.
And we also like to thank every one of you for still being here at this late hour. And we had a very busy and interesting morning. We hope to have you back tomorrow. And I'll leave the microphone to Sor.
Muchas gracias. Con este panel cerramos la jornada de actividades del día de hoy. A nombre de la Dirección de Innovación Educativa, les damos las gracias por su participación y les invitamos a acompañarnos el día de mañana en este mismo auditorio. Que tengan una excelente tarde.